Dear Lord in heaven, thank you for this day that we've been blessed to receive. Thank you for the opportunity to come together throughout a pandemic that's been raging, through the blessings of internet and the access that we have to our communities. We ask that you'll please pour out your Holy Spirit through the messages that you've given us to understand the subject that is going to decide our eternal destiny, radical feminism, gender equality. We ask that you'll please bless us and guide us as we learn and study about the basics of these things today, and bless each member to come away with a deeper understanding and appreciation, that we may apply these things to our lives and come up to the standard of godliness that is required of us, that we may be useful to go to another group of people ready to receive your message. We ask that you all these things in Jesus' name. Amen. So we will start today with a review of a class that Elder Tess first presented back in late 2021, and it was titled Understanding Feminism. So we're going to take a look at some of the information that was shared by Elder Tess and go through it step by step and see if we can gain some understanding as to where we are today with our understanding of feminism and the different types of feminism and the different waves. So as a movement, we should understand feminism to a fair degree now. It's been 4 years since the Midnight Cry, and it's been 3 years since the increase of knowledge of the Sunday Law. This will be an interactive class, so I'm going to ask some direct questions at some of the participants, and if you're able to answer, feel free to give an answer. So where do we mark the Midnight Cry? I have a line up here of 144,000 and a line below of the priests. Can I have someone please let me know where the Midnight Cry was, a date for the Midnight Cry on the line of the priests?
2018.
Thank you, John. 2018. So it's been about 4 years now, roughly, since the Midnight Cry message of 2018. And is someone able to say, what has the Midnight Cry done for us? It's done lots of things. That's a hard question to answer. But we'll start with that. What has the Midnight Cry done for this movement? How has it changed us?
We've done a backflip.
Yeah, thank you, Marie. We've done maybe not a backflip, but maybe we've progressed in our understanding. We have changed from that right-wing understanding, conservatism, to a left-wing, using American political terms, of a feminine understanding, and this can be summed up as gender equality. So I just mentioned a minute ago that it's been 3 years since the increase of knowledge on the Sunday Law. So we have a line up here of 144,000. And we know that our waymarks are divided into 5. Elder Tess has taught that the hand of God we can see as an application of 5 waymarks. And in between these 5 waymarks, we have the 4 dispensations. And this is depicted in this way here, which represents the 144,000. So we know we have a time of the end. We know in the middle we have our Sunday Law. We have our close of probation and second advent. Is someone able to let me know what year was the year on this reform line for the increase in knowledge about the Sunday law?
2019.
2019. That was good. Thank you. I didn't see who said that, but thank you very much. 2019. And what was the subject that was taught in 2019?
About feminism.
It was about feminism. Yeah, that's great. Thank you. We have understood for a while now that both Ellen White and through repeating patterns and structures that we have in the Bible, we have waymarks in between each of these dispensations. These are understood to be an increase in knowledge and a formalization. Increase in knowledge and formalization. If we overlay this pattern of what we've got here, an increase in knowledge and a formalization, with the Millerite history, we can also see that this would be an example of Boston, Concord, and Exeter. These were events and times that took place in a Millerite history. So we could say Boston, Concord, Exeter, followed by a test. And this pattern repeats throughout this reform line. So we know as we're approaching the Sunday law, our increasing knowledge is on feminism, the events that take place here at the Sunday law, as we term this waymark, will continue to be the issues taught throughout this period. It'll be a greater understanding of the compromises that are taking place and our stance with true feminism and what that looks like. At the increase of knowledge, we have a small understanding of a message. And as we progress through this time period, our knowledge increases to the point where at the formalization, we have quite good clarity of the test that arrives here at the Sunday law. And we know through Ellen White and through Spirit of Prophecy and the Bible that many are overthrown at the Sunday law. And many are overthrown about the subject of feminism. We understand ourselves, the divide that took place within our movement. As we went through the priest line, we saw in 2019, a lot of people step away. There was a test there for them. Thank you, Catherine. I'll just clear that up. Catherine has just pointed out to me very kindly and correctly that I just had the dates wrong here. Thank you, Catherine, for the correction. It is appreciated. So what we would like to do is look at a definition of feminism, which is a test that we are approaching at the Sunday law. And I'm going to share the screen with you so that you're able to read through the definition and you'll have something to look at. It won't be just me speaking these things. I'll have the link of where these descriptions come from if you want to go and look at these things as well. Sometimes I've taken the definition out because or the location of these quotes because some of the sources aren't great. They may use a piece of information that's okay. So I've taken this source out completely. So when that pops up on the screen, can I please ask that someone reads that definition for me, please?
I could read that for you, Graeme, if you like.
Thank you.
Definition of feminism: a belief in and advocacy of the political, economic, and social equality of the sexes expressed especially through organised activity on behalf of women's rights and interests.
Thank you, Lee. So, a belief in an advocacy of the political, economic, and social equality of the sexes. So this is the entire, includes the entire fabric of society. Feminism is the equality of the genders. The definition of sexism, which I'll also read out to you. Definition of sexism is the name that feminists have used to explain how social inequalities between men and women are reinforced or upheld through norms, values, and attitudes. So our norms and values and attitudes that we have are going to vary depending on where we live. And these three things keep or uphold or keep in place gender inequality. Depending on where we live and at what time in Earth's period of history, will also contribute to these norms, these values, and attitudes. And these three definitions that were given, norms, the values, and attitudes, can be substituted for culture. So our culture keeps in place the inequality that we have throughout society. And changing the culture of society is what we're looking at. So Elder Tess throughout her studies laid out a simple structure showing a complicated and quite contested period of history that doesn't have much clarity amongst many dates and the amount of waves of feminism. So we're looking at feminism, where it began and the history that it runs through. And when you go online, there are varying and conflicting agreements, as with many, many sources, but particularly within feminism, it's quite separated and splintered because of the different types of feminism and how they understand the role of feminism within society. It's quite commonly agreed that in 1848 is where this period starts. Up on the board, 1848. I'll share screen with you with some quotes. There's going to be a few a few of these quotes come from this same source. So the first wave basically begins with the Seneca Falls Convention of 1848. There, almost 200 women met in a church in upstate New York to discuss the social, civil, and religious condition and rights of women. Attendees discussed their grievances and passed a list of 12 resolutions calling for specific equal rights, including, after much debate, the right to vote. We understand that things don't just happen in a vacuum or happen out of the blue. There must have been a series of events that led to this day, and we would know them. There were many things happening locally within America and even outside of America that led to the movement that we see in 1848 to gather 200 women together to this convention. So we're looking at first wave feminism. Yeah. First wave feminism. So a small minority of people come together here at this point to start to raise awareness of the sufferings that women have dealt with throughout history and addressing the points that they are receiving or the inequality that they're receiving at this point. This is not the first time that feminism arises. The understanding that men and women are equal predates this by thousands of years. People have known this. But what we see first wave feminism refers to is the fact that it is the West's first sustained political movement dedicated to achieving political equality for women. And we saw this through the suffragettes of the 19th and the 20th century. So why this is the first wave of feminism is because it's the first political movement within the West to start to address the gender inequality. And we understand that at the discussion of 1848, they talked about women being able to vote. And in 1919 to 1920, the vote was granted to women. From the earliest days of the first wave of feminism, there was a concentrated effort by those who were opposing women's rights, who knew how to attack feminism and suffragettes. So feminism is a political movement designed to abolish those gender norms and stereotypes and beauty standards. And those who opposed feminism did everything they could to stop people from joining that movement because it is affecting their culture. It's affecting everything that they thought that they believed and known was true, at least to them. And the way they attacked feminism was through fear, through conspiracy theories, through lies, and through playing on the ignorance of people in that time. Particularly by focusing on appearance standards, what feminists to them looked like and how they depicted them. So in every article that was published, the pictures of women were depicted as unattractive, unmarried, unlovable. And this attack continues even to this point today. It's never stopped. It's the main attack used. we have a small break in history before we start the second wave of feminism. I'll bring up a quote for us to look at again. When that is visible, can I please have someone to read that out for me?
Sure, read
I'll
that,
read.
Graeme. The feminine mystic was not revolutionary in its thinking, as many of Frieden's ideas were already being discussed by academics and feminist intellectuals. Instead, it was revolutionary in its reach. It made its way into the hands of housewives who gave it to their friends, who passed it along through a whole chain of well-educated middle-class white women with beautiful homes and families. And it gave them permission to be angry. And once those 3 million readers realized that they were angry, feminism once again had cultural momentum behind it. It had a unifying goal, too, not just political equality, which the first wavers had fought for, but social equality. Thank you, Graeme.
Thank you for reading that out. So what we see here within this quote, and something that we've seen within the movement internally, is this understanding that the message that was given back in the Millerite time for the Millerites was local and concentrated to America throughout the early, mid, and late 1800s. As the message of Adventism swelled and grew, we know that it went past these days and it became worldwide, and the issues became worldwide. So too with feminism, we see the same structure taking place. It starts localized, at least within America. And what we see in this book is that this book, through the second wave of feminism, allows access to 3 million people within a short period of time. And this is what is able to help drive momentum into feminism, and also see the political as well as the social equality of females within society. This is where the term also originates from the feminine mystique, is the personal is political. And this statement is a slogan that is used throughout second wave feminism. So this book helps to drive and further moment feminism, which started back in the first wave. As it comes to the second wave, it introduces the idea of the personal is political. Towards the end of the second wave, as we head down here to this point in time, which we mark as 1989, we start to see some problems occurring within feminism. by the end of the second wave and through the third, the movement has become very separated. It's very fragmented. There's lots of different groups within feminism. You would type in how many types of feminism are there, you'll get a long list. They can be broken down into the three categories that Elder Tess talks about. Your cultural feminism, your liberal feminism, and then your radical or true feminism. So there's so many different voices and ideas towards the end of this period. And unfortunately, the idea is picked up that in order for feminism to be successful and long-lasting, we need to bring into our movement of feminism people who look good, people who dress the part, who look pretty, to try and stop or counter the arguments of the attacks that were sent at the first wave feminism, which was that the feminists were unlovable, that they were somehow ugly, and that they wouldn't be married as a result, which is again pushing on these cultural ideas that have been set by men for thousands of years previous. And this became the downfall of feminism, the idea that feminists need to compromise in the standards that were set up because they misunderstood why they were there, why radical feminism was attacking the structures of society. So that compromise to retain the standard of beauty that was set by men, to suggest that a female doesn't look good without makeup, or to wear the hairstyle in a particular way, or to wear a particular type of clothing or jewelry, has destroyed what true feminism stands for. So the attacks on feminism at the beginning were very successful. And it took compromise from within to splinter and fracture feminism to what we see it today. So Elder Tess taught us through Vespers, a very powerful tool that she used, was to show how hardwired our brains are. And what she did was to get us to picture God in our minds. And without you even thinking, a picture was summoned into our minds. And that was different for each person. But the story was, the overall picture was very the same. When we looked at God, we saw this Zeus-looking figure in our imagination. When Elder Tess told us to look at a goddess, we saw this beautiful younger woman. Our brains are hardwired and conditioned, and have been for a very long time. And this is what we're trying to break away from rewiring our brains from the structures of patriarchy that have been set up throughout society and that are continually bombarded upon us every moment of our lives here, and will continue to. That same tool can be used with the beauty standards. So we picture God and a standard comes up. The same tool can be used with beauty standards. So we're going to move on towards the end of second wave feminism. And I'll share a quote with you again. This is going to take us to 1989. (1989) is a Supreme Court case where we see Price Waterhouse, which is an employer, a law firm, fighting against Hopkins, which is a lady who worked for the law firm, Ann Hopkins. So the employee, Ann Hopkins, sued her former employer, the accounting firm Price Waterhouse. She argued that the firm denied her partnership because she did not fit the partner's idea of what a female employee should look or act like. So a partner within a law firm is someone high up who may have ownership over the company or who may have considerable power within the company. So that's a partner. The employer failed to prove that it would have denied her partnership anyway. So even if she didn't dress like this or act like this, then the employer was unable to prove that it would have denied a partnership. And the court held that constituted sex discrimination under Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. The significance of the Supreme Court's ruling was twofold. First, it established that gender stereotyping is actionable as sex discrimination. And second, it established the mixed motive framework that enables employees to prove discrimination when when other lawful reasons for adverse employment action exist alongside discriminatory motivations or reasons. So Anne was told that she needed to dress a certain way, that she needed to wear makeup and do her hair in a certain way to be less confrontational and to be more like the women that she saw around her, more the way the Apis bull would portray a woman. And this court case is landmark because she won against the employer that she worked for, because they were because it was discriminatory. So I'll stop sharing for just a second. So another thing that took place here, we saw, this is a court case, Supreme Court case of Anne versus Waterhouse. Another thing that took place in 1989 was the understanding of intersectionalism. And I'll share what intersectionalism is. And we will have a look at a basic understanding of this. So what is intersectionality? Put simply, intersectionality is the concept that all oppression is linked. More explicitly, the Oxford Dictionary defines intersectionality as the interconnected nature of social categorizations such as race, class, and gender, regarded as creating overlapping and independent systems of discrimination or disadvantage. Intersectionality is the acknowledgement that everyone has their own unique experiences of discrimination and oppression, and we must consider everything and anything that can marginalize people, gender, race, class, and sexual orientation, and physical ability. And this was first coined by Professor Kimball, I hope I pronounced that right, Crenshaw, back in 1989. And then the word was added to the dictionary. So when people are depicting intersectionality, they use a Venn diagram. A Venn diagram are these overlapping circles that you can see on the screen. And it's a simple structure like we use on the board here, these simple structures to try and explain or give a diagram of a set of circumstances or events. And what we see here is that there are people in society, predominantly women, who are disproportionately affected by sexism and discrimination, which impacts them in very different ways that many of us wouldn't be able to comprehend. And this is why Elder Tess shares these articles that she does on TMW, that we may come to a better understanding of the events and circumstances that are happening to people outside of our own sphere of influence. That brings us to the start of what we might say is third wave feminism. And the beginning of third wave feminism can often be marked at 1991. And quite a bit happens along many reform lines, as we've seen at the time of the end and the increase of knowledge. If we were to take these waymarks down to our line, we would see that these are 1989 and 1991. And with no surprise, we see that gender equality is at a critical point in history and is growing into its third wave, as God is raising up a people to present a message on gender equality. We've looked back here at where feminism and radical feminism was taught within our movement and within our line. But we understand that this seed has grown from the very beginning. This seed began at the beginning of our reform line in 1989. We have been raised up to teach gender equality, to understand it and to comprehend it and to make sure that we enact it in our lives. I'm going to share screen with you again. So third wave feminism began here in 1991. And we're going to look at, why do we call this radical feminism? We've talked about, we've heard talked about cultural feminism, liberal feminism, and radical feminism. So what is the difference between radical feminism and the other two feminisms? The reason this group gets the radical label is that they view the oppression of women as the most fundamental form of oppression, one that cuts across boundaries of race, culture, and economic class. This is a movement intent on social change of rather revolutionary proportions, in fact. So the idea and the difference between radical feminism and liberal and cultural feminism is that radical feminism wants to change the structure of society that keeps the patriarchal norms and conditions going. Liberal and cultural feminism want to integrate women as they are into society without changing the fabric of society, without changing the culture. They don't want to upset the balance, they just want to be recognized within their own cultures. The problem with that is that sexism and that domination of man over woman would never cease. It can never go away without breaking down the very fabrics of the society and the structures that we currently endure. In 1991, there was a court case there was a person, Clarence Thomas, who was going to be sworn in as a Supreme Court judge. But there was a lady there called Anita Hill who shared with the FBI her experiences of working with Clarence Thomas. He was deeply sexist and was sexually harassed Anita while she was at work. And this is before he became a judge. He was working in another field. In 1991, President George W. Bush nominated Clarence Thomas, a federal circuit judge, to succeed retiring Associate Supreme Court Judge Thurgood Marshall. So Clarence was to replace somebody else within the Supreme Court. The only way to get elected is for somebody else to step down or to die. The Senate hearings on his confirmation were initially completed with Thomas's good character being presented as a primary qualification for the High Court because he had only been a judge for slightly more than 1 year. There had been little organised opposition to Thomas' nomination, and his confirmation seemed assured. So at that point, everything was looking good for Clarence Thomas. He hadn't been that well known, and it seemed assured that he was going to get the position of Supreme Court Justice. Until a report at a private interview of Anita Hill by the FBI was leaked to the press. The hearings were reopened and Hill was called to publicly testify. Anita had to go to court to publicly testify what had happened. And Hill said on October 11 in 1991, in televised hearings, that Clarence Thomas had sexually harassed her while he was her supervisor at the Department of Education and the EEOC. When questioned, I just want to highlight this bit, when questioned on why she followed Thomas to the second job after he had already, I'm going to take away the word allegedly, had already harassed her, she said she was working in a reputable position within the civil rights field that had been her ambition. So you can already see within the questioning there, they paint Anita to be the problem. She is the cause. Blame Anita. They say, well, you followed this person to the next job. Why'd you do that? Instead of focusing on the person, Clarence Thomas, they made it about Anita. So she had worked in a position and she had a goal in mind. She wanted to work in civil rights. And the best place to do that is where this person also happened to be, Clarence Thomas. So imagine a society that predetermines what every woman is going to be. They're going to be some sort of stay-at-home mum. They're not going to be able to have goals or ambitions or work towards anything. The position was appealing enough to inhibit her from going back into private practice. So she moved to a second job where this Clarence Thomas was also working. And she didn't want to go back to where they first worked at the Department of Education because the opportunities where she currently worked met her goals and what she wanted to do with her life. And she said that she had realized later in life that her choice had represented poor judgment on her part. I don't think that's fair to her. I think get rid of the person, but this is also in 1991, so things have slightly changed. Following on a little bit down in the next quote, looking at Anita Hill still. Shortly after the Thomas confirmation hearings, President George W. Bush dropped his opposition to a bill that gave harassment victims the right to seek federal damage awards, back pay, and reinstatement, and the law was passed by Congress. So this is a big setback. If you're a victim, you're unable to seek damages or getting owed what is due for the harsh incidents that have taken place. 1 year later, harassment complaints filed with the EEOC, which was that Department of Education that we saw, were up 50%, and public opinion had shifted in Hill's favour. So what we're seeing here at the beginning of third wave feminism in 1991 is that a person comes forward, Anita Hill, a woman, and stands up against what is going to be a Supreme Court judge and says, what you did was wrong. Here's what happened. And she copped all sorts of backlash. I couldn't even imagine. But then, as we'll continue to read, private companies also started training programs to deter sexual harassment. And when journalist Cindy Kennard asked Hill in 1991 if she would testify against Thomas all over again, Hill answered, "I'm not sure if I could have lived with myself if I had have answered those questions any differently." So she would have done the same. She couldn't sit still. She couldn't sit silent, not going to take it. The personal was political for her. The manner in which the Senate Judiciary Committee challenged and dismissed Hill's accusations of sexual harassment angered female politicians and lawyers. According to DC congressional delegate Eleanor Holmes Norton, Hill's treatment by the panel was a contributing factor to the large number of women elected to Congress in 1992. Women clearly went to the polls with the notion in mind that you had to have more women in Congress, she said. Not just more women in Congress, but more women in all roles and companies and jobs. So what we're noticing here is that we see towards the end of second wave feminism and the beginning of the third wave feminism, this cluster of events take place where we have a Supreme Court ruling, we have a deeper understanding of intersectionality and how minority groups are impacted by the discrimination that they face. And we have Anita standing up against a Supreme Court judge, receiving massive backlash, but also with the backlash came a more positive aspect where people mobilized against what had taken place, mobilized on the side of Anita Hill and started to push forward and be more assertive again in securing gender equality. I'm going to scroll down a little bit more. And what we'll see here is what has happened as a result of Clarence Thomas being allowed to continue as a Supreme Court judge. And on Friday, June 24th, Justice Clarence Thomas got something he sought his entire adult life. He wanted recognition. Writing in support of the Supreme Court's decision to overturn Roe versus Wade, Thomas recommended that the court, as a next move, strike down a half a century's worth of what he called demonstrably erroneous precedents establishing the right to contraception, the right to same-sex sexual conduct, and the right to same-sex marriage on television and across the internet. Commentators took notice. So this was, I believe, this year that this took place. And what we're seeing is the result of not just one person, but this mindset and culture that is pervasive throughout our society. And in particular, we're looking here at the US, but it's no different from any other society around the world. So these are the three waves of feminism that that Elder Tess looked at back at the end of 2021. And we've just gone into a brief look of what happened during these periods of time and the decline and growth and the splintering of feminism as a whole, and how it has been attacked and the implications that that has. We've looked at radical feminism and why it's called radical. It's radical because it wants to make social change. It wants to tear down the structures of patriarchy that are set in place within society and build a gender equal society. In a particular quote that was given, the reason this group gets the radical label is that they view the oppression of women as the most fundamental form of oppression, one that cuts across boundaries of race, culture, and economic class. This is a movement intent on social change of a rather revolutionary proportions, in fact. We understand that Elder Tess has depicted for quite some time now the line of Eden to Eden. And within the line of Eden to Eden, we had three different sins here take place at the beginning of Eden, and we're having three sins that are to be reversed before the second advent, before returning to Eden. And what were those three sins that were written down here? Someone able to let me know?
Racism.
Racism. Where do we put racism?
The first one.
Last.
Wash.
First, last,
Middle.
middle.
Worship.
We've got
No, last. Worship is middle and gender is first.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
And what we see in this chiastic structure that Elder Tess has drawn out is that we see these same things being reversed. We look at racism, we look at worship, and we look at gender equality. And we know why gender was struck first. This is the greatest sin. This sin permeates every part of society and is the hardest to remove. It's the very first sin that happens against Eve. Eve gets the blame. And throughout this entire history, it is woven throughout every fabric of our societies throughout this entire time. And we here at the end of the world are tested on gender equality and undoing that patriarchal structure that has been set up and in place to empower males, to be able to continue being at the top or to dominate. And this is what happened back here. Adam ruled over Eve. Never what God intended. So 2019, with the continued unfolding of the message of gender equality for God's people, and that looks like radical feminism. Radical feminism changes those structures that are set up. We've seen that from the beginning of this Earth's history, and we're seeing it right through to the close. But it is our determination to make sure we understand and implement in our lives that change. And that change is understood by the phrase, the personal is political. Understanding that the actions that we take at home reflect our political beliefs and understandings. one of the biggest dividers between mainstream feminism. We depict mainstream feminism or feminism as 3 different types. I'll draw it over here. You've seen Elder Tess go through this many times. Radical, liberal, and cultural. One of the biggest dividers between mainstream liberalism and radical feminism is individual and personal freedom. Can we make personal decisions that don't tie into the wide issues of gender equality and that affect people in our sphere of influence? So when I'm living at home, I'm affecting the people that I interact with around me, and this affects my sphere of influence, whether for negative or positive. So understanding that the personal is political affects that sphere of influence. Liberal feminism wants to take women from where they are and integrate them into the patriarchal cultures and structures of society, and are willing to compromise and to make excuses that will contradict gender equality. Those contradictions and compromises look like, when they're saying it, they look like, I can do it because I'm feminist, and it's my choice to do these things. So these branches of feminism here will say that because I chose them, because I'm feminist, that makes it okay. That's my personal choice, and that empowers me. It wasn't somebody else's choice over me. And unfortunately, that's the wrong way to look at it. It wasn't enough. When we're over here and we're looking at our political structures, we're looking at, within America, left-wing and right-wing politics. As a movement, we transition from the right to a left with a more holistic understanding of events that are taking place and the character of God. But if we made this jump over here, which many of us did, with the assumption or with the idea that over here we focus on personal freedoms, and we wanted to bring these over to here, personal freedoms, then we had 2 groups, liberal and cultural feminism, that were ready to embrace our understanding. There's not that much difference between these 2 groups here. And Elder Tess has taught how on many things they come to the same answers and conclusions. The path that they took there to get there might have been different, but they came to the same point. So it's not enough to make the jump from a Republican to a Democrat or from the right wing to the left wing, but we each individually need to make that shift and understand why we've made that shift and the implications of that shift. Why were we originally aligned with the right? Adventism is over here in the conservative area, and we focus on freedom. So much of the Sunday law teaching that Adventism will still have is on the freedom. You can't tell me what day to worship on. It focuses on that, and it is ingrained within us. It's been taught within us, and it's hard to rewire ourselves. But it can be done and must be done. So when we move from the right wing to the left wing, if we were to compare this with coming out of Egypt, we saw they wanted to bring their idols with them. We're trying to do the same when we bring across the compromises and the misunderstandings that we have, or the blatant disregard that we have against radical feminism and the concepts and ideas it upholds for pure gender equality. So, yeah, let's leave those idols alone. On our understanding of baptism vows also has grown and has become deeper and with more understanding, as you would expect. As we've gone through every reform line, we have grown in understanding and knowledge and wisdom. But we haven't fallen into the trap of liberal feminism and compromised on beauty standards or apis bull mindset. We haven't done away with those vows that are there. They're still in place, and they still represent that principle of what we stand for gender equality. And it is not just a personal choice for us to do it and say, well, it's my choice to wear these items and this is why I chose them, and so it's okay. That is a compromise. And when we do those compromises, we're found in these two areas here. And these two areas continue to hold patriarchy in its position of power. So does anyone have any questions on what we've gone through here? Has anyone seen me slip up in any words that I've gotten wrong, or do I need to be corrected on anything?
I have a
Please feel-
question.
Yes.
So we know that the world is failing now with gender equality and feminism, but according to the line, are you saying that when there's a major event that takes place, and then it tends to spur on women to get on board and fight for women's equality, is, with the Roe versus Wade, even though that the world is failing, could this then spur on people to pick up where we've sort of dropped the ball, so to speak? Is that what the line is showing us?
That's a good question, Marie. I don't know that the line's teaching us. I think we're seeing a progressive, not a progressive, quite a radical undoing of gender equality throughout a society. If God was to let the world go for a few more years, for however long it took, gender equality wouldn't sort itself out. There would always be that dominance over females. So I will leave the rest of that question to people far more skilled than myself, but it is a very good question.
Thanks, Graeme.
Ray, you had a hand?
Yeah, so I just want to clarify with liberal feminism, and I think you were kind of explaining that. Would we, with our understanding, maybe term it libertarian feminism, in that it's essentially just sexism with some personal freedom?
It's still sexism. It doesn't change that it's sexism. But for an example, the idea that has been promoted throughout the end of the second wave through to the current point is that they focus on, both these groups focus on the idea that you can wear what you want, it's your choice, therefore it wasn't a patriarchal society that set up that conditioning that you have in your mind, and it's your choice. So we see people dancing in front of feminism signs, you know, beautiful women dancing in front of signs with whatever they've got on, nice clothes and makeup. And that is, in their eyes, supposed to be feminism. But I think that's a counterfeit version of what feminism is. Does that answer your question, Ray?
Yeah, thank you.
Oh, Graeme, if I could add something to Marie's question. If we look back to the Millerite time period and the issue with slavery, it's easy to forget today how accepted and normal it was to, that slavery was in the world for thousands of years. As Christians, we know that it's been, what, say it was, you know, 5,000 years, be more, but say it was over 5,000 years of slavery was accepted. If you're a non-Christian, you believe in evolution, they'd have slavery at a much more, that they would think that slavery's been around for a lot longer than that. So we've only had freedom or this anti-slavery understanding for a very short time in the Earth's history. So people started standing up against slavery, probably you could go back to the 1700s with the Quakers, but they were a real minority and considered very fringe. Then it starts to gain a bit of traction. And then you get into the 1800s and it's really stepping up. So if you say we're generous and we say that anti-slavery sentiments were about 200 years old, that's a drop in the bucket compared to the world history. So, and now we accept it today as just being abhorrent, horrific, unacceptable. But what happened in the Millerite time period, in the crisis in the United States, it could have gone the other way. You know, and then slavery would have continued to be accepted, and it would have been harder and harder to fight. So we shouldn't expect to think that sexism will be understood and it won't be seen to be as horrific on this earth as slavery. We're removed. We're so far removed from the worldview of the 1700s and the 1600s that we just take it for granted today that slavery is bad. It just wasn't like that. And so the majority of the world today just thinks that the attitude toward women is it's normal, it's acceptable, get over it, it's not that bad. It's only radical feminism that really sees the deep horror of it. And we're living in a world where it's going either way. We actually know it's not going to succeed. But the battle is now. There was a chance when radical feminism was was a strong voice, but it, you know, it was diluted by liberal feminism and then died. So even with Roe versus Wade today, it's a lost cause. Even if some states are able to keep abortion clinics open, it's actually a lost cause. And we need to look back at the Millerite time period and realize slavery could have been a lost cause as well. It was God's interference that brought about its end. So if that helps, thank you.
Thank you, Elder Terry. Does anyone have any more questions before we close? It doesn't seem so. So
Could I just, sorry there, Graeme, could I just say one more thing about what just Elder Terry just said? So the picture that gives me then is that in 1863, Christ was going to come back because of the way that slavery was going. Is this correct? I might be wrong. This is just the picture that I'm getting. So because there then was a turning away from slavery, and also, of course, we know that Adventism failed, so he couldn't come back anyway. But then this time, as Elder Terry's just pointed out, it's not going to improve. So this time round, there won't be a turning from it like there was in slavery, and Christ will come back. Is that that's just my picture of what Elder Terry is saying. I'm not sure if I'm right or wrong.
I will let Elder Terry answer that. I will handle that one.
I have a question.
Yeah, sure.
That's the case, what Marie is saying. The people in the movement, the 144,000, even though the world is failing, they have to pass their test, right? So the world is failing, but the people that would be the 144,000 have to pass that test. It has to be upheld, otherwise there'll be no conflict in the end.
Yes, there are a group of people who pass the test. Well, we might close there for time. If you're able to kneel with me, we will close in prayer. Dear Lord, thank you for this day that we've been blessed to receive. Thank you for the Sabbath hours and the opportunity to come together. We still have so many questions as you're working and you're leading and you're guiding, and we know that you will unfold all to us at the appropriate time. And we ask for clarity of mind and parables and understanding of the history that we live in, that we may understand and see the events that are taking place around us and before us, that we may adjust our lives and live accordingly to the ideals of true feminism, radical feminism, to change the structures that are in place within our own hearts and within our own lives, to see that the personal is political. I pray that you'll please bless each one of us today as we get ready and prepare to listen to Lynn. I pray that you'll bless Lynn and guide her. And may we all understand and comprehend the important message that we are about to receive. We thank you for your loving kindness. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.